I didn't blow out everybody's eardrums, so it worked fine. Good. That's what we like to hear. When I need to lean on something, I stand up there, and when I don't need to lean, I stand here. So I hope you don't mind me moving around a little bit. I wanted to do something a little bit different today from what I normally do. Normally we follow the lectionary readings, and we're going to take a bit of a break from that for a while now as well. But today, some of you may know, I've returned from a conference. I've been away for 8 days, which is quite a long conference in my book. But it was good. It was very worthwhile for the AICEME. I call them ACME. I don't know how else you can pronounce that acronym, but that's what I call it anyway, and it reminds me of the cartoons, you know, the Acme products that they used to blow up things with Coyote, the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and that kind of thing. And so it gives me a bit of a smile when I say Acme. But anyway, they're the Association of International Churches of Europe and the Middle East. So they're people, pastors and spouses who come from all over the world, and they all serve international congregations, English-speaking congregations throughout the world, really. And it was started off in Bratislava, and as you may know, that's only a 50-minute drive from Bratislava to Vienna. So the two churches in Bratislava and Vienna shared the hosting of that event. So we spent some time in Bratislava, Slovakia, and some time in Vienna. And we had sessions that were for education purposes on third culture kids and global nomads. Does anybody know what a third culture kid is? Some people have got some idea. Does anybody have kids that are now living in a country other than where they were born? Well, then you know third culture kids. Third culture kids basically means that children who have been born in one country who are living in another country, and because of those two separate cultures, they have created a third culture, which is an international culture, which is pretty much most of us here if we're not in our home country. So most of us have become third culture adults. And so we've become adults that have gone from our home country to a foreign country, and we've experienced a third culture. That's the whole idea of international, because people outside international churches don't quite understand what it means to be part of an international church. It's not just an English-speaking church in a foreign-speaking country, because you can have international churches in England, and believe it or not, they speak English in England. It's also for people who have experienced an international culture and no longer feel that they're that comfortable just being in their own home culture. They feel different. They feel like an outsider. They've seen a wider world and a different experience. And so we had some really good sessions on explaining how that affects people and how that experience can make people think and act and feel, and why they act in certain ways. Now, I'm not going to go through all the sessions and explain to you what all that means now, but it was a very interesting topic for international church pastors, which was very useful and encouraging. But I guess I wanted to share with you the things that I took away from the conference. So in a way, this is a sermon/report on my time in this conference, which was a very useful time. And it was also good to be around other pastors who share and experience the same things that you do on a daily basis, and to be able to discuss some of those things. And it's also good to find out how lucky we are here in Switzerland and how good we actually have it. And it puts our problems really into perspective. When you consider the problems that you have, and you're sitting in a room of pastors who come from, you know, Moscow and Cairo and Jerusalem and Palestine and Turkey and all these other places in the world, and they share the difficulties they have, and then it gets to you and you've got to share the problems you've got, and you think, yes, we don't have enough Sunday school teachers, you know, the budget falls a bit short, and, you know, it really puts your problems into perspective. So it's good to be around other people and hear their experiences and hear that as well. And it should be an encouragement to you as well that they're churches that we can be praying for, and it's something that we are a part of, a group of, that doesn't give us a hierarchy. It doesn't give us people who tell us what to do, but they're like-minded churches that can help us and support us and encourage us. So it's a really good organisation. I'm really glad I went. We're really hoping that next year that Alison can make it as well. It'll be good for her too. But one question I got asked a lot while I was on this conference is, where is home? Are you going home? And that's a tough question to answer. For me, my entire life, that's always been a tough question to answer. You know, sometimes when you change your Facebook status, you can, change your relationship, and Marcus is now in a relationship or whatever. And once when I found that button and put my wife down, people jokingly said, I'm glad you're married finally because you've been together for 20 odd years. So, they made a joke about that. But you can also say, what's your hometown? And it made me pause and think about it when I was filling in my Facebook form when I first moved here, and I'm thinking, well, what is my hometown? I put down Lucerne. Lucerne is my hometown. So when people say you're going home, I think, well, yes, I'm going back to Lucerne. That's where my family is. That's where my home is. But it does beg the question, what is home? As an expat, an immigrant, a refugee, a global nomad, a local, whatever title you use for yourself, and I think quite a few of those would fit into this group here, it's very hard to difficult to answer that question, where is home? Is it where you grew up? That could be home, but where I grew up was in Melbourne, Australia, but I spent most of a large portion of my life in Adelaide, Australia. So it's not really Melbourne, Australia. If you ask my daughter where we came from, she will say Kadina, South Australia, because she spent 7 of her 10 years in Kadina, South Australia. So she spent 70% of her life in this place. For me, it was somewhere I just spent 7 years of my 47 years. So it wasn't, that's where I just came from. I came from Adelaide, South Australia, because I spent 40 years of my life in Adelaide, South Australia. So even in the same family, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. Where is home? Where is your hometown? Is it where your parents live? Is that your hometown? Because both my parents have passed away. So I really don't, I love my brother and sister-in-law and my beautiful niece who's here visiting with us from Dubai. I just embarrassed her and she didn't stand up and embarrass herself, but that's okay, she's used to it. And they live in the Barossa Valley, beautiful part of South Australia. But both my parents are buried there. It's not a place I go back to very easily. I don't comfortably go past their grave sites and enjoy that experience. It's not something I enjoy doing. So I wouldn't even call that my hometown. Is it the country you were born in? Is that your home? Because my brothers and sisters were all born in Germany, and they don't consider Germany their hometown. They grew up in Australia. I was born in Australia, and I don't necessarily call that home. Is it where you are now? Is that just what home is? Home is a very hard question to answer. For many of us, they're tough questions, and they can cause a lot of stress, because some of us do this journey and go on this adventure to another country to do ministry or work or whatever it is as an adventure and take it on and think, wow, what an exciting thing to do. And some of us come because we have to. It can be for all sorts of reasons why we have to. Maybe we're escaping war. Maybe we're escaping a difficult situation. Maybe we're coming with a spouse who's got a promotion, but we really don't have the job and we need to go with them, and we don't necessarily choose to come to this country. So it's not always a happy experience either, being in another place. It can be a difficult experience for people too. So what makes something home? And must that mean that it's a place for the long term? Is home just somewhere where you spend a lot of time? Because as an international congregation, we're going to be saying goodbye to people, and that's always difficult. Does that mean they were any less at home for the period of time they were with us? Does that mean that they will not be at home in the next place they go to? Does that mean that someone has to be around for a long time for this to be home? Even time doesn't determine what home is. I moved around a lot as a kid. I tried to add up all the different places I moved to, and that was really hard, because even though we emigrated to Australia, my father was a cabinet maker, and in the early 1970s in Australia there was a recession. I'm pretty sure it must have been a worldwide thing, but I wasn't that big on politics in the 70s, so I was only a little kid, so I wouldn't have any idea. But in Australia I know there was a recession, so my father had to go wherever there was work. So we moved to Darwin at one stage and lived and worked there for a period, and we went back to Melbourne and lived and worked there for a period, and then we went to Coober Pedy, and I worked and lived there for a period, which is in the middle of Australia, in the middle of the desert. We lived in South Australia for a period, at several different places in South Australia. So I lost track of how many different places we moved to, but I think it was about 12 different schools I went to in the 11 years of schooling that I did. There was one school I went to for 2 weeks. We just moved because my father was looking for work and he had to finish where he was, so we moved into a house, and then he got offered a job in Melbourne, so we had to pick up and move again 2 weeks later. So I was in one school for 2 weeks. There were some schools that I went back to twice, so I counted them twice, because I was there in my first year of school and my very last year of primary school in the same school. And I saw kids there who I'd spent my, what we call prep, the first year of school with, and was into year 7 with. They had spent their entire life in one school, and I envied that they could spend their entire life in one school. For them it was just, that's just what life is. But for me, I'd spent so many different places and so many different times in so many different areas, I felt like a nomad. But does that necessarily mean it's a bad thing? I learnt to make friends really quickly. I didn't know how long I was going to be somewhere. So I got to a new place and said, you're now my friends. And that was it. You couldn't spend 3 months making friends because you didn't know if you had 3 months. So let's just get on with it. So I learnt to make friends really quickly. Not everybody adapts that easily, by the way, because I know my sister had more trouble than I did with that kind of thing. Now I feel very comfortable in moving around. I have no problem with it, but that's not everybody's experience. But everywhere we went, I felt at home wherever my immediate family was. My dad would smoke a cigar every now and then, so if he smoked a cigar in the house, it smelt like our house. Mum would cook a meal that she always cooked, and that would help it make it smell like our house. So the rooms were a different configuration and they were in a different part of the country, but it felt like home. It always felt like home because Mum and Dad were there and my brothers and sisters were there. My immediate family was there, and that was home, and that's all I ever needed. And that's what I need now. So when people say, are you home? Yeah, I live upstairs, just above this roof here is my apartment, and that's home for us. That's where we live. We don't know how long God's got us there for. As long as He says we're there, we're there. But that's our home. We were at home when we were in Kadina. That was home too. And before we moved to Kadina, we were at home in the other places we were at. We're home wherever my wife and children are, that's home. The Apostle Paul tells us in this passage that we are adopted into God's family. All of us. I know it says brothers, but please ignore that, okay? We can give them a little bit of grace. 2,000 years ago, they weren't so good with equality as what we are now. It means brothers and sisters. It means all of us. We're all adopted into God's family. All of us are adopted. So no matter where we live, or for how long we live there, we are part of a family. Now you can imagine we've got an equal thing that we share. We're adopted into the same family. That's why we call ourselves brothers and sisters in Christ, because we're in the same family. Jesus is our brother. God is our Father. Isn't that a good thing to be a part of? We've got this family here. Where our family is, we're at home. And if we come and visit from another country and visit with another part of our family, we're still with family and we're together with our brothers and sisters. I think that's an amazing thing to be a part of. Can you imagine back to a time where you weren't part of that family? Can you imagine how it would be difficult to settle into a new culture, into a new country, into a new place with a new language? When I think of all the differences between where I came from to where I am now, if I didn't have a church family alongside with me, I don't know how I would have made the adjustment. There's several things that I can rattle off that are just complete opposites to what I've experienced. You guys have a break in the middle of year for summer. That's just weird. Summer is at the end of the year. That's when summer is, you know. I'm still not used to that. You know, I've got to try to get my head around the fact in 8 weeks everything winds down for about 6 weeks. All the pastors at this conference were sharing that with me. I'm going, yeah, that's right, I've got to get my head around that. At Christmas time in Australia, that's when we get our summer. So it's Christmas holidays for us. You've got 6 or 7 weeks. The kids are off school, businesses close down, everything sort of slows down a little bit because that's when our summer is. So that's completely different for a start. So the school year goes over 2 years. How does that work? We start in January, finish in December. That's a school year. It's a year. That's normal, isn't it? No, here you start in like August, September and go through until June the next year. It's kind of strange. They speak a different language here. Grew up speaking English in Australia, and here they speak German. Well, it's a kind of German. They've got to learn 2 different languages because I've got to relearn German as well as the German that I know. I'm working on it. I'm getting there. I'm getting better at that too. And then it depends on which part of Switzerland you go to. You might need French or Italian as well, or Romansh. You need another language as well. So language is a big barrier. It's a big difference between them. Climate, certainly a big difference between us. This is a winter's day for us. This is almost summer for Switzerland. 26 degrees and a bit of rain, that sounds like winter for me. Nadia, my niece, is just coming from Dubai, and she said the extreme hot weather there lasts for 6 months in the 40-degree temperatures. That's a completely different part of the world. So that's the temperature, the climate is very different to me. Snow, as you know, is very different for us. We've never experienced snow before. So climate is different, language is different, timing is different. Let alone the fact that we lived in a rural area with farmers all around us, to living in the middle of a city, to driving everywhere we go, to walking everywhere we go. Can you get the idea that absolutely everything is different? And the only thing that was made possible to make that usable and functional was the church family that I had to come to. Now imagine you had to do all of that and it didn't have all of that support and help and encouragement from family. And you just start afresh in this new country and you don't know where to start. That was my question throughout this whole conference, was how can we be that family to people who come here, whether they choose to or not, and let them know that they're part of the same family? How do we help people to fit in and belong? Because it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and many of you would have had to have done it at some stage. It's not an easy thing to fit in and belong into a completely different culture. That when you open your mouth to speak, even if you're using the appropriate language, it signals you as an outsider immediately. Even if I speak in perfect Hochdeutsch in a supermarket, they know straight away I'm an outsider because I don't get the dialect quite right. Or even if I just use my accent in German. I didn't know I had an accent in German, but people have tried to pick me up on it. And so when I say I live in Switzerland, they go, oh, okay. So I blame the Swiss for that. It's really my Australian accent coming through in my German, but it doesn't quite sound American, it doesn't quite sound English, so they don't quite get my accent when I speak in German. But that gives you away straight away as an outsider. You're not one of us because you speak a different language to us. It's hard to fit in. How do we help people to do that? The challenge we have ahead of us on a daily basis is, what are we doing to make everyone feel like they belong to the body of Christ? Because as that passage explains to us, everybody has the opportunity to be a part of the body. We've all been adopted into the family. But as you know, you can be adopted into the family and not feel like a part of the family. What do we do to make everyone understand that they are a part of this family? They've got this wider group of brothers and sisters that can be there for them and help them, encourage them and show them the way. How do we help newcomers to belong? Now, I don't mean just newcomers who come and visit our church, because that's one of the hardest things in the world to do, is to walk through those two doors. And those of us who've been here for a while don't realise how uncomfortable that is for a first-time person. Now, add to that the fact someone that might never have been to church before in their life, can you imagine them walking through those doors and feeling comfortable? It's not easy. Most people come to church after they've been invited by somebody else. We can't just expect a stream of people lining up going, oh, there's a church service on there, let's go there. People usually only do that if they're Christians already and they're coming to visit. And we love having them here, and that's fantastic. So we're always welcome you. You're always welcome at our door. But can you imagine being a non-believer and doing that? That's not how people come to faith. People come to faith through people who are in the family, who start to befriend them and make friends with them and invite them along to church and share their faith with them and disciple them themselves. You'll hear time and time again from me that it's not my job to do the work of ministry. Ephesians, further on in the passage of Ephesians, tells us it is a pastor's job to equip the saints for the work of ministry. It is my job to teach you and equip you to do the work of ministry, not to do it for you. You can't bring your friends to me and expect me to save them for you. I can't save anyone. Jesus did that once on the cross. All I can do is share my faith and my story my way. But God's also called you to share your faith and your story your way. I shared this with the young people's group when I spoke to them a couple of weeks ago. that if every single believer in the world invited one of their friends to become a believer and showed them how to do it, the Christian population would double overnight. All you need to do is one person. All you need to do is love one person into the kingdom, and that doubles the Christian congregation overnight. We don't need to think about growing 1,000 people ministry or discipling 20 people. I mean, Jesus discipled 12. He picked 12. That's what he worked with. And then they went on and spread it further, and they went on and spread it further. If we all just did one person, prayed for one person, shared with one person, loved one person, and that person came to faith, we'd double Christianity. Doesn't sound very hard, does it? Doesn't sound very difficult. It's very difficult to belong to a new culture. Whether you're an immigrant, an expat, a third culture kid, third culture adult, some people even use the term resident alien, global nomad. No matter how we describe ourselves, we're making a new home in a new place, in a new culture, in a new language with a new landscape. There's many biblical examples of people who have done this. Joseph is one. He had no choice in the matter. He was sold into slavery by his brothers and ends up the head guy of Egypt and is able to help his family in the future. Did he sit around going, woe is me? Or did he go on and say, okay, God, what have you got for me to do here in Egypt? I'm in Egypt, what am I going to do with it? He got on with it and said, I'm in Egypt, what am I going to do with it? Paul, for example, he was a Roman citizen, born in Tarsus, modern-day Turkey. And he's in Jerusalem. He was a nomad. He was someone who went from place to place. He didn't even stay in one church as the apostle of one church for long. He put somebody else in charge and then moved on to the next one. There's lots of biblical examples that we can follow. We're adopted into God's family. Later on, Paul talks about being citizens of heaven in Philippians. When he writes the Philippians, he says, we are citizens of heaven. Now, heaven is a place that we are not in now. We can look around and watch the news and know that we're not in heaven, can't we? We can hear about a poor farmer who's had both of his legs cut off in a terrible accident and realise that we're not in heaven yet. Heaven hasn't arrived yet. One day, we're told in Revelation that heaven and earth will become one place. Heaven and earth, the two will become one and will come together as one place. There won't be a dividing wall between heaven and earth anymore. There will be a new creation, a new heavens and a new earth. But we're citizens of that place living in a foreign area. That's where we get this idea of resident aliens. So we're citizens of heaven on earth. How do we act as citizens of heaven on earth? Do we fit into the culture and take on some of their characteristics as we do here when we come to Switzerland? Of course we do. We eat more cheese and chocolate now than we've ever eaten in our lives. You take on some aspects of culture. Does that mean you take on every aspect of that culture? Of course not. You bring some of your culture of heaven with you. We bring some of our culture from Australia with us. One day we'll get you guys to try Vegemite sandwiches. Maybe not. It's too good to share with you guys who don't appreciate it. So we take our culture of heaven with us into this earth that we're here. And that is what we're called to do, to share our culture with others. If we're citizens of heaven, we live on earth, we are all third culture kids. We're all kids who are living in a culture that's not the one that we were born into or the one of our parents. We're not living in the culture of our Father in heaven. We're living in a different culture. And he's got us here for the short term or the long term. However long we're here, he's calling us to play a role and do something for it. We're not passengers. There are no passengers in a family. Did you know that? I know on Mother's Day we celebrate mothers, and I don't normally make a big thing about Mother's Day because it's particularly tough for me because I lost my mother. But I know there's other people who struggle with it. I celebrate mothers and I think they do a fantastic job, but we shouldn't just celebrate them one day a week. Because if mum's the only one who does something at home, that's not a very healthy family, is it? Dad sometimes needs to get off his butt and be involved as well. The kids also need to learn how to look after themselves, don't they? They need to be able to learn to make themselves food. If kids go through life not knowing how to make a meal, they'll move out one day and never know how to cook and never know how to look after themselves. They need to know how to clean their rooms, they need to know how to do dishes, they need to learn stuff. So in a family, everybody's involved, everybody pitches in, everybody does a part of what's involved. And it was fantastic to see Yuhi up here playing, and her friend who came to sing for us, it was beautiful, and Walter came up and played. We need more people up here serving. So if up front is your role and that's what you know you can serve in, we need you. If behind the scenes is your thing and you don't want to be up front, we need you there as well. If you can work with kids, we need you. There's all sorts of different ways that you can serve the church, but you can also serve God in so many other ways. Because whatever career or job that God has given you, He's given you a place to serve in, and that is your mission field. That is your opportunity to share your faith with other people. So you can serve God just as easily up here playing guitar as you can being a dental hygienist in Lucerne and talking to people and praying for their families and the people that they know afterwards. No matter what your role that God has placed you in, you can be a citizen of heaven on earth. As a parent, it's my place to help my children feel like they belong in this culture and this place. If my children moved here and I never helped them in any way to fit in, they would hate it. And we wouldn't stay here very long, we'd have to go back to Australia. But it's my job as a parent to try and make them fit in as much as possible, help them learn the language, help them understand it, even when they don't want to learn it anymore. It's saying, we're watching this movie in German tonight. Oh, Dad, we just want to watch it in English. No, you're going to watch it in German, you're going to practice it, you're going to practice your German. And if I didn't help them to become and fit into that culture and become like the people around them, they would never feel comfortable here. They would never feel like home. Whether you're a mother or your father, part of your job as a parent is to make where you live a home, isn't it? That should be our job as well as Christians, is to make this place a home for people when they come. I hear so many great stories of people saying this church was a place that they felt that they belonged, and it really made them feel comfortable and fit in and be a part of the culture that they were living in. It was a safe haven in a culture that they didn't understand. It was somewhere where they could learn from other people. Other people took them and showed them the bus system and showed them how to do this and helped them with the schooling and all that kind of thing, and fill in driver's license forms and all sorts of stuff that they needed to know that other people who've been here longer could help them with. That's what we should be for one another. As parents, I know we're brothers and sisters, but as big brothers and sisters, maybe we can say, our job is to make this place a home for others. As a church that's devoted to people living in a culture that's not their own, we need to realise that our role is to help them to find a place to belong and to be a family. That's my takeaway from this whole conference, was that's what I think we need to be, is to be a place where people belong. We need to make this place as comfortable and comfy as the person's most comfortable chair in their home, so that when they come here they feel like, this is where I fit in. This is where I feel a part of a community. This is where I feel that I can get by in life. Whether they're believers already or not, we love believers coming to our church and we'll always welcome them. They've already got a foot in the door because they're already a part of the family of God. But particularly for the non-believers, we need to help them feel that as well and feel that part of it as well. We need to be devoted to the people who are finding themselves in a culture not of their own. We're citizens of another culture, a heavenly culture. We fall short of that often. That doesn't mean we're perfect. My brothers and sisters and I, we fought all the time. I know my kids fight all the time. All the time. It's tiring sometimes, but I know my brothers and sisters, I was the youngest of 5. My older brothers and sisters, they would always pick on me, and then I would get even with them and we'd fight with one another. But if anybody outside the family picked on one of us, then the 5 of us would gang up against the people who were picking on us from the outside the family. We all supported one another then. We need to do the same. We need to be there for one another, even though we don't get it right all the time. Even though there's going to be times where we might fight with one another. Hopefully they're not so bad. But hopefully we can make up and be brothers and sisters again and get on with our lives. We're all very different. We are all very, very different people. This reminded me of Monty Python skit, but I won't go there. You probably all know it. We're all very different people. None of us is the same. None of us are identical. Even if you're twins, you're not identical. We're all very, very different people. So we're going to rub each other the wrong way sometimes. That's where we need to focus on unity and make sure that we're here for the same purpose. That doesn't mean that we can't be brothers and sisters and still love and support and build one another up, no matter how different we are. And that's something that we need to make sure that we're going to focus on in the future. And we're going to be doing that a lot more in the coming time. In the next few weeks, I plan on doing a series on prayer. So we're going to do a topical series on prayer, on what is prayer, who do we pray to, why do we pray, what does prayer do, what does it look like, are there different ways to pray. So we're going to be doing that over the next few weeks and focusing on prayer because I really want us to understand what that means. And I set you all as a piece of homework over the summer period, in the next few weeks in the summer period. I want you to think about how we together can make this place feel like home for those who don't yet belong. Think about that, because there could be all sorts of different things that we could together come up with that is better than one person trying to come up with it on their own, that says, hey, we should do, and that would really make people feel like this is home. Great, we want to hear that. So start thinking and praying about those things. But just remember, if you come up with an idea, I'm probably going to ask you to be involved in making that idea come true. So don't come to me and say, Marcus, you should do, because I'm just going to say, hey, that's a great idea, when are you going to start? But think about it, pray about it, because that's the homework that I want you to set yourself over the next 3 months. It's important. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity.